as a dad of 5, I learned that sometimes you have to repeat yourself when talking or asking kids to do something. Yeah, right? Unheard of. Like, put your clothes away, right? And then 5 minutes later, put your clothes away, come on. And another 5 minutes later, put your clothes away. Sorry, I got distracted. Another 5 minutes. Why aren't your clothes put away? I don't know. Or sometimes you have to say the same thing in a different way for each child. Like for the older girls, it's, hey, get your shoes on. Or for James, dude, where's your shoes? Get them on. Or the younger girls, it's, all right, girls, let's go find your shoes and let's get them on. All right? And so it's different. It's the same message, but a different audience. And as I was preparing for today, I felt kind of like that. That's how it's going to be today. It's just, we're all still seeing the pain and the agony of what Christ is going through on the cross. We hear some of the same things as last week. And that's fine. Because maybe the world distracted us this week and we forgot what happened or what was asked of us. Maybe last week it just didn't strike a chord with you. Or maybe you were preoccupied with the things before Sunday, or maybe the things that were coming this week. Or maybe you were just distracted by the sickly, nasally voice talking to you last week. And sorry about that. I literally got that cold that morning, and I zonked out for like 3 hours afterwards and just coughed all week. And so I feel a lot better now. But regardless, I pray that we will not get distracted by the worries about the outside world today, and that we would hear from what God has for us. Can we do that? Yeah. Amen. So last week, after being beaten, mocked by the Roman soldiers, Jesus struggled up the Via Dolorosa, the way of suffering, with a crossbeam on his back. And eventually, too weak to continue with the crossbeam, Simon of Cyrene bears the cross behind Jesus as they arrive at Golgotha. And that's where we start back up, and we'll cover all 4 Gospels, Matthew 27:35-34, Mark 15:24-32, Luke 23:33-43, and John 19:18-27. But I'll start piece by piece as we go. So we're going to start with Matthew 27:35. When they had crucified him, they divided his garments among themselves by casting lots. And sitting down, they began to keep watch over him there. And then in Mark's account, Mark 15:24, and they crucified him, divided up his garments among themselves, casting lots for them to decide what each man would take. And above his head they put up the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." I don't think that was supposed to be in there. But anyways, Luke 23:33, and when they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on the right and another on the left. But Jesus was saying, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they cast lots, dividing his garments among themselves. Now, the Bible doesn't give the gory details of the crucifixion. The early readers would know firsthand and have seen what a crucifixion is and what they do. Unfortunately for us, we don't have to experience that or see it firsthand. However, the Romans were good at their job. They had perfected this method of execution and used it many times during their reign. And thanks to historians, we have those details of how they did it. We learn that they drove nails into his hands and feet. And did you know that it wasn't in the actual palms that they drove the nails? There isn't enough meat or muscle or bone in the hand to hold the weight of the body. The nail would rip the hand apart. They would drive the nails through the wrists near the hands. The set of bones that attach the wrist to the hand keeps the hand from ripping free. It's brutal. See, blood loss was rarely the cause of death for the person on the cross. Most often, they died of asphyxiation. That is the inability to breathe. Before the nail is driven through the person, before the nail is driven through the person's feet, the legs are bent at the knees so that the bottom of the one foot is flat against the vertical beam, and then the one foot on front of the other, and they would drive a long nail through both feet. And then they would lift the cross up, put it into place, and the weight of the body causes the person to slump, putting all the weight of the body on the nails through the wrists, compressing the lungs, and keeping the person from inhaling. You're stuck like this in an exhale. If they wanted to breathe, if they wanted to inhale, they would have to push up on the nails on their feet, all their weight on that one nail, just to inhale. And they would repeat that process just to breathe. Weight on the feet, then weight on the hands or the wrists. If the Romans thought a person was alive for too long, they would end up breaking the legs of the person, making them unable to push up to inhale. And we'll get to see that next couple weeks in the harmony when they break the legs of the criminals next to Jesus. John 19:18 says, there they crucified him and with him 2 other men, one on either side and Jesus in between. Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, a part for each soldier, and the tunic also. But the tunic was seamless and woven in one piece. So they said to one another, let's not tear it, but cast lots for it, to decide whose it shall be. This happened so the scriptures would be fulfilled. They divided my garments among themselves, and they cast lots for my clothing. And therefore the soldiers did these things. The spoils of war. These were spoils of war. The soldiers would divide up the victims' possessions among each other. In Jesus' case, they took his outer garments, took it apart at the seams, and then divided it up among themselves. They would have done the same thing with the tunic, but the tunic, the inner garment, was solid without seams. And so they decide to cast lots. They decide to draw straws or roll dice. We're not exactly sure what cast lots was, but it's kind of in that terms. And then John mentioned that this fulfills the scriptures. In Psalms 22, starting at verse 12, it says, many bulls have surrendered me. Strong bulls of Bashan had encircled me. They opened their mouths at me as a raving and roaring lion. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within me. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaves to my jaw, and you lay me in the dust of death. For dogs have surrounded me, a band of evildoers have encompassed me. They have pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. They stare at me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. They pierced my hands and my feet. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothes they cast lots. David speaks of the way that his enemies intend to conquer and plunder him. He figuratively depicts his own historical experience in the poetry of Psalm 22. Understanding that the pattern of the righteous sufferer would find its ultimate fulfillment in the righteous sufferer, Jesus. And John understands what happens to Jesus as a fulfillment of what David describes. The stripping and the killing of Jesus, his garments to be used by others, invites reflection on the way that his righteousness covers others. As Jesus dies on the cross, the clothing he wore in life is being taken from him to cover others. The seamless and complete tunic suggests that his righteousness is whole and indivisible. Those covered by it will stand unashamed in the holy presence of the Father. And unlike the soldiers casting lots for the tunic, we don't have to wonder if the odds are in our favor to receive righteousness. We only need to accept that Jesus is our righteousness and receive him as such. Amen. Since the place where they had crucified him, he was on the way into the city, they would likely post the charge above or below them. And we read in the Gospels that they put it above his head. In Matthew 27:37, it says, they put up above his head the charge against him, which reads, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." In Mark's account, it says, "Now it was the third hour when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge against him read, 'The King of the Jews.'" And in Luke, it says, the inscription above him, "This is the King of the Jews." And in John, verse 19, it says, "Now Pilate also wrote an inscription and put it on the cross. It was written, 'Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews.' Therefore, many of the Jews read this inscription because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and in Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews were saying to Pilate, 'Do not write the King of the Jews. Rather, write that he said, I am the King of the Jews.' And Pilate answered, what I have written, I have written." In John's account, we see that the inscription was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. Hebrew was the theological language. Greek was the intellectual. Yeah. Words today is not working for me. Language. I need to work on my English language, I guess. Latin was the political language. Let those who view things theological, intellectually, and politically know this. Jesus is King. But we see that the chief priests are not thrilled about the charge above his head. They want it to say that he claims to be King of the Jews and that he was wrong to do so. I think Pilate is obviously tired of hearing from the chief priests and doesn't give in to them and shows a bit of courage this time, saying, what I've written, I have written. You have to deal with it. It is what it is. Something that hasn't stopped, though, during all of this has been the mocking and the insults. And we read in Matthew 27, at the time, 2 rebels were being crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those passing by were speaking abusively to him, shaking their heads, saying, you who are going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. In the same way, the chief priests also, along with scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, he saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He has stated in God, let God rescue him now, if he takes pleasure in him, for he has said, I am the Son of God.